Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're diving into something kind of different but absolutely fascinating. Instead of crunching modern data like we usually do, we're actually going to treat a classic fable as a real psychological case study. We'll be looking closely at the story of a farmer named Mohan. We really want to get inside his head, understand his decision-making process, and figure out exactly why pure greed completely destroyed his farm.
But before we get into the nitty-gritty of Mohan's specific story, I want you to just consider this for a second. Can sudden treasure actually destroy someone's life? I mean, it sounds totally counterintuitive, right? We all kind of dream of finding hidden wealth, winning the lottery, or just stumbling into some massive inheritance. But this exact question really frames our whole exploration today. Because as you'll see, sometimes what looks like an absolute miracle can literally be the exact catalyst for a massive catastrophe. So let's see how this all plays out.
All right, let's establish our baseline here. So Mohan lived this very quiet life in a small village. He was definitely poor, but he was also incredibly hardworking and honest. I want you to picture a life built entirely on steady, daily effort. There are absolutely no shortcuts in his world. Literally every single grain he feeds his family comes from the sweat of his brow just working out there in the dirt. He's a farmer. He understands the seasons, he understands the value of patience, and his life, while undeniably difficult, is actually remarkably stable.
And then comes the inciting incident. One day, while he's just doing his normal, backbreaking work in the field, Mohan unearths exactly one small gold coin right there in the dirt. And man, this is the catalyst for the entire story. Just out of nowhere, the universe completely breaks the rules of his steady, predictable life and just hands him a piece of sudden, unearned wealth. I mean, he didn't farm this coin, right? He just stumbled right upon it. And that sudden disruption of his everyday reality, well, that is exactly where the trouble begins.
And this perfectly illustrates just how quickly the human mind pivots. His immediate thought is, well, if one coin is found here, maybe there's more treasure. Mohan was thrilled, obviously, but let's just pause on this for a second. It really starts as just innocent curiosity. Honestly, you or I would probably think the exact same thing. But in Mohan's mind, this thought rapidly twists into a genuinely dangerous obsession. His focus abruptly shifts from being grateful for what he has to entirely focusing on what he might be missing out on.
So, the very next day, he doesn't go back to planting his seeds. No way. He goes right back to that exact same spot and just starts digging. And wouldn't you know it, after a few hours, he actually finds a second gold coin. Now, finding that first one was a huge surprise, but finding the second one, that completely seals his fate. Greed just fully takes over his mind at this exact moment. The whole pacing of his life goes from being steady and predictable to just completely frantic. Mentally, he stops being a farmer right then and there, and he fully becomes a treasure hunter. Just think about the massive shift in his mindset here. On one hand, you have farming. It's steady, it's slow, but crucially, it provides guaranteed food. On the other hand, you have digging for treasure, which is frantic, it's destructive, and it's built entirely on false hope. I really want you to think about the immense opportunity cost happening right now. Why on earth does someone just abandon a proven, guaranteed livelihood for this frantic obsession? Well, it's that psychological lure of instant gratification. Mohan completely threw away his long-term stability just to chase this immediate, shiny illusion.
And the physical result of this mindset shift is absolutely devastating. Literally day and night, he dug up his entire field, completely ruining the harvest. His behavior just became incredibly obsessive. He was digging relentlessly, round the clock, driven almost mad by this idea of what else might be buried right beneath his feet. He fell super deeply into the sunk cost fallacy. He felt like he had already sacrificed so much time and effort digging that he just couldn't bring himself to stop. And by doing that, he physically destroyed his actual real wealth. His fertile land and his growing crops, all in this wild search for imaginary wealth.
So let's really break down this terrible trade-off. What did he actually gain from all this madness and destruction? Well, just those two literal coins he found at the very beginning. That's it. Despite all of that frantic day and night digging, he yielded absolutely nothing else. Zero. And what did he lose in the process? His entire crop and the guaranteed food for his family. It's crazy when you think about it. He traded his family's actual literal survival for two small pieces of metal that he couldn't even eat.
And the wildest part is that this didn't just happen overnight. It was a slow-motion disaster. Like within days, he found those coins. Then over the next few weeks, he completely abandoned his crops for all that frantic digging. And then months later, the absolute mathematical consequence arrived. Complete and total harvest failure. Because he hadn't actually tended to the land, nothing grew.
Which of course leads to the final, really terrifying conclusion here, which is starvation. His own greed literally led him, step by agonizing step, straight to the brink of ruin.
I really want you to picture him hitting absolute rock bottom here. His family is hungry, his fields are just this destroyed, churned up mess, and those 2 gold coins, well, they can't be planted, and they definitely can't be eaten. But right then, he has this incredibly profound realization. He says, if I hadn't been greedy and worked hard at farming, my family would be happy today. Man, it is such a heartbreaking moment of clarity. He finally sees the massive trap of instant gratification that he fell into. He realizes that his steady, honest, and yeah, maybe a little boring work was actually the true source of his family's happiness and security all along.
But hey, our explainer today doesn't end in tragedy. And honestly, that's the genuinely uplifting part of this whole story. Mohan actually finds a really clear path to redemption. First up, he deeply and honestly acknowledges his mistake. He didn't try to blame the universe or complain about bad luck. He just totally owned his own greed. Second, he goes right back to his hard work. He goes back to patiently planting seeds instead of desperately looking for shortcuts. And finally, gradually, he begins reaping a good harvest once again. Over time, his crop improved, and his life actually became even better and more stable than it was before he ever found those initial coins.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer today, and it leaves us with one really memorable question to think about. Is the real treasure under the dirt, or is it in our hard work? It is just so easy to get distracted by the promise of sudden windfalls. We constantly look for that one golden coin that's going to solve all our problems instantly. But as the story of Mohan's farm brilliantly shows us, the enduring value of consistent, honest effort is what truly sustains us in the long run. The real wealth wasn't what he blindly dug out of the ground, it was what he patiently cultivated from it. And I think that's a seriously powerful lesson to remember the next time you or I are tempted to abandon a steady path for a quick shortcut. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today, and I will absolutely catch you next time.